is hard to imagine future without sustainable development. It is a topic that is increasingly talked about in the Balkans too. More about it will tell us Goran Janjic. He is a sustainability and business strategist with more than 20 years of experience in advising top management clients about sustainability, public, private, and international development. He was a keynote speaker on many international conferences, so this will not be a hard task for him. Goran, please join us on the stage.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank to this amazing team that organized this very important event and giving me the opportunity to feel a little bit younger. That's why I left my suit in the hotel. So today I will be speaking about the business in new economic perspective, and we'll start off with a video that should give a flavor of what we are going to talk about. So please, if you, yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, can you? So this video is part of our communication material and, quite scary. I think in the last 2 years, many of us experienced some of the challenges because of the things that are happening, starting from pandemic onwards. The whole idea and the mainstream narrative now is that we are, living in an epoch of Anthropocene, where humans are practically influencing the changes on the planet, predominantly. Can you, next slide? So when you look on your right side, you will see now that we are dominantly influencing the planet, we are heading towards the extinction. Another thing in the mainstream is the business that we know, that you all know as neoliberal model that is serving the planet for the last 70 years, is actually fueling the planetary destruction. The reason for that is it's based on the never-ending exploitation of nature and natural resources and never-ending consumerism. The GDP is actually about commodification of nature. You extract from nature, you create a chair, a car, iPhone, and when its life ends, you are disposing it. That creates pollution. So the whole idea, if we are about, to save the planet, to mitigate the problems, is related to changing the economic model. So what you can see on this slide is actually, within the time frame in the next 10 years, the most of the dangers and the risks that we are all facing is actually related to climate emergency. The extreme weather events, floods, droughts, those are the main drivers of the challenges that we are facing. On the top of it, you have social aspects of it, because many countries, many people will have to move, to migrate from the regions where there is no water, where the living conditions are not good enough, and it even create conflicts in some of these countries where we talk about, who owns the resources like water. So, next slide. Here you can see how human activity is causing global warming. Here you can see where 73% is coming from the energy. The energy is that we are using in transportation, that we are using in the industry, that we are using in shipping, aviation. These sectors are primarily creating emissions that are practically warming up the planet and creating these extreme weather events. On the top of it, you have agriculture, forestry, and land use, because if you want to create certain type of the products, you are practically influencing the use of the land. You are cutting down forests, preparing the land for a different type of activities related to commercialization. And you also have other things which are related to the waste management and the industry. On the right side, you see how different types of transportation is actually affecting global warming. Again, we are talking about the emissions. So all these aspects that we are seeing here is actually are leading us to the conclusions that the way how we travel, the way how we produce, our lifestyle based on consumerism, on things that we need to have, 2 cars, 2 iPhones, things like that are creating big problems, and the global community is working towards changing the economic model that we are used to. Next slide. Here you can see which countries are affecting the most the global warming, and you can see that United States and China are leading, but historically it will be the most developed Western countries. Now China, which is growing, is actually one of the biggest contributors, but historically, from the first industrial revolution onwards, it was United States and most of the countries from the Western world. On the right side, it's carbon emission per capita per country. So again, the biggest graphic is related to China, but it's actually the highest contributor to the carbon emission is, I think, Qatar. USA is very strong. It relates to the lifestyles of the people. So obviously, those countries which has better lifestyle spend more contributing to the carbon emissions more than other countries. Countries like China, like India are catching up. The least one who are affecting the climate are the countries, like Cuba, like Latin American countries, like Africa. Next slide. Food is also impacting climate. So now what we can say about the livestock production is contributing the most. 80% of all arable land in the world is used actually for feeding. So with the growing population in the world, you wouldn't like to spend most of the non-renewable resources on feeding animals. So the whole idea in new economic perspective is actually to change the way how we eat. So it very much refers to the previous presentation, healthy lifestyles. At the same time, 70% of all water resources is used for the practically the arable land that is used for the livestock production. So what you will see is, or conclude, it's not sustainable, and some of the countries in EU, but it's also part of a broader perspective, is cutting back on the livestock production. So Holland itself is using 25 billion euros to practically cut off on beef and livestock production. And Netherlands is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, agricultural producer in EU. That will also affect other countries and our region, you know, when we are thinking about long-term perspective. If you have a high number of companies that are dealing with, you know, like a meat and dairy industry, they will be in a serious problem. And in a couple of years' time, everything that they invested in their business will be stranded assets. They will not be able to sell their business because the regulations that will be imposed upon them will practically not let them, or it will not encourage any potential investor to invest in their business. On the right side, sorry, can you turn back? On the right side, you will see greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of food products, where you see the beef, lamb, cheese, and you know, like some other are leading the way in terms of unsustainability of the business itself. Next slide. How we as a human are also contributing to planetary destruction. It's by pollution. Every year, 11 million of metric tons of plastic enters the world's oceans. So there are a lot of new projects that are, you know, trying to resolve this challenge, but you know, it's not that easy. It's not that simple. The main contributors to these are the companies that many of you like. I believe that Sana doesn't, because it's Coca-Cola in the first place. Next slide. Next slide, please. So you will see the Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Unilever, Nestle, Procter & Gamble are the biggest polluters in the world. You will see a lot of nice commercials, nice video spots where they are, you know, like supporting broader society, but in a nutshell, they are the biggest contributors. They are doing something, you know, like to change the picture, but their business in this new perspective is not sustainable. Obviously, these companies are still lobbying that these laws that are upcoming are delayed so that they can, you know, get a lot more from their business. But things are changing because there are also on the other spectrum companies that are leading in terms of sustainability. Next slide. So, human activity is also causing a biodiversity loss. In the last 60 years, it's about 69–70% of all species extinct, and most of us are probably not aware of that. So you maybe know the case of, you know, like the bees that we primarily need for food production. They're also in danger in the way how we are doing business now. The 44 trillion, which is almost a half of a global GDP, is dependent of biodiversity. And the way how we are doing business is actually is practically we are cutting back on our future prospects. Next slide. So we see how the current situation is like this, you know, like we see that a lot of species underneath us are ceasing to exist. We are on the top of the chain, and we act, like nothing, it will not affect. It will surely affect us, and we should start thinking about this. Next slide. So maybe some of you are already familiar with the country overshoot day, or Earth overshoot day, which is practically the volume of natural ecosystem which is given to a particular country per year, so they can use it in terms of commodifying the nature. The countries which are the wealthiest, again, you will see it will be Qatar and some Luxembourg, United States, Austria, Belgium. They are using out all the natural resources, which are, like by a certain methodology projected that belongs to that particular country in March or in February. Some other countries, like Jamaica, they are self-sufficient. So if all countries are having the business models and social habits like Jamaica, the planet would be on the safe side. But because most of them are using out all of the resources in the first quarter or the second quarter of the year, we are practically, indebting Earth, and it cannot stay for a longer period of time. So, Paris Agreement from five years ago is actually recognizing all the things that are happening with the world economy and the pollution and primarily emissions, is setting up a goal that we should continue our economic or social, working in an economic or social framework in a way that we prevent future warming more than 5.5% since 1990. At this moment, we are on a road to 2.73. So if you look at this slide, you will see that we are, going towards planetary emergency and planetary destruction. And you may already are familiar of this year's droughts in the European Union and China, when Rhine or Yangtze practically these rivers lost all of the water that they had. Next slide. So why 1.5? 1.5 by the methodology that was used by a leading world scientists are some kind of a safe side to prevent non-reversible climate disruptions, and everything that goes beyond that is actually leading the planet and the humanity towards the risks that we cannot change, but we can only mitigate some of it. It will affect the food security. It will obviously affect the biodiversity loss. The things that it will affect the food production, because all the drought, extreme heat, and floods will limit our ability to produce enough food for a global population. Next slide. So how can we transform the economy? And we can transform it by shifting to clean energy. To shift to the clean energy is not that easy, because you will have some intermediate time that you will still need to use fossil fuels. Most of the countries are still trying to balance that, because they don't have enough resources to shift immediately. Mainly you will be able to use solar energy and wind energy, which is not sustainably, it's not enough, especially with all these geopolitical tensions that we are having right now. We need to change the way how we produce food. The leading priority is to shift towards a regenerative agriculture, to change our habits in urban culture, to shift towards using more plant food rather than meats, change the way how we commute, use electric or public transportation, change the power usage of the industry, and change the way how we finance new investment programs where the priority will be given to the companies which are deploying green technologies. Next slide. Some of the benefits of the new way thinking is actually that the global sustainable funds assets reached 2.7 trillion in December 2021, and they are supposed to exceed 53 trillions by 2025. It means that the investing community in EU and in US primarily, even in Asia, are shifting their priorities towards the companies which are looking towards sustainable solutions for their business. Those that are still thinking on investing in a business as usual will not be able to get the money the way that they received up until now. Most probably that money will be much more expensive, but many of the investors will not invest in such projects. International banks are also, multilateral banks are also by regulation forced to shift their business practices from fossil fuel companies towards the projects that are sustainable. Next slide. So with all of this talking, this is one of the most important slides on this presentation. Last year, several months, I've been speaking to many of the regional companies and financial institutions, and they are not recognizing the tsunami of regulations that are coming in, so practically endangering their business prospects with the investments that are ongoing. Here you can see some of the regulations that EU already implemented. Some are still advancing, but in a nutshell, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive is forcing 50,000 of the biggest European companies to disclose how they act on transforming their business towards sustainability. What that means for the regional businesses, for Bosnia and other countries in the region. If you are in their supply chain, for example, IKEA or Lactalis or name some of the biggest European company, you will be forced to change too. If you don't change, they will stop working with you. So imagine Bosnian company which is having like a 10, 50 million euros a year exchange with some of these European companies, and they are not aware that they need to shift their business models. In a year or two, everything that they practically developed throughout the lifetime of their business will practically be bankrupt. And this thing is something that people in the business community are still not aware of. There are companies that were already visited by their but they are counterparts from European Union, and they were willing to upgrade their business. They were willing to buy their business on the basis of sustainability framework. So if you didn't incorporate sustainability in your corporate practices, they wouldn't invest in you. I know some of the examples of that. At the same time, there is a financial regulation which is forcing financial institutions and investment funds in the European Union. So they are also forced to change their business practices, and they need to shift their investment towards the companies that are sustainable and the projects that are sustainable. So there is 4.7 trillion at this point of money for sustainable investing, but there is no enough sustainable projects in corporate business. These are some of the things which are very important. These are the things that can be opportunity for regional businesses, but can be a serious challenge, especially for the companies which are working with their counterparts in European Union. Those who are still working on a national level, obviously they will have a little bit more time to adjust, but those who are primarily having their ambition to work on the EU level, they will need to change their mindset and start thinking about embedding these new principles, which are called ESG principles, environment, social, and governance principles. At this point in our environment, there are no consultancy, or there is no companies which can really help us in that transformation process. So we need to look beyond our borders. So these are the most important aspects of future considerations, and actually today's considerations of our businesses here. And I obviously stand with my prior speakers, which are encouraging you to stay here. But if you are staying here, then use the opportunities that are arising from transformation of the global economy. Next slide. This would be, my final statement. So, if you recognize the changes, and we are on a crossroads, the global community, the environment, economy is at the crossroads. You need to see these signs. If you see these signs, even if you are a smaller business and you have smaller capacity but have a greater vision, you will be able to succeed in an international arena. Those big ones which believe that they are self-sufficient will have serious problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Goran, for sharing these great insights and for providing us with another perspective on how to look at sustainability and what the future brings us. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A session. So please raise any questions that you have. Yeah, we see a hand here.
Good evening to you and everybody. My question is, so I noticed the topic about electric vehicles generally, and I'm quite interested in them. So my question is, how much more efficient really they are compared to internal combustion vehicles? Because, as I know, they contain, their main part are their batteries that contain lithium-ion cells. So for us as humans to find lithium in our earth and stuff like that, to make those batteries, that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And that also makes a lot of pollution in those factories that, in which the batteries are made. So my question is, with all those processes, how much more efficient really electric cars are compared to the normal cars?
You're obviously thinking about the emissions. Or when,
yes.
when you say how efficient you are meaning about in terms of the reason why electric cars are introduced is actually that they have lesser impact on the environment.
Yes, by driving them, but in the process of making them, they still make quite a lot of pollution, especially with
I
mining
agree with you.
activity.
I agree. My personal belief is that electric cars at this point are sustainable, because if you look through entire value chain, you will have to extract all that lithium and other minerals, and you are continue polluting the world. I don't think that you should be thinking black and white, because it's not really black and white. We are on a course of, like increasing the planetary emergency on a basis of increased emissions. The technologies that are in place now are not perfect. We are all in some kind of transition. Obviously, those who are promoting electric vehicles as solutions have strong lobby. But I think that public transportation should be the first choice, because again, you will have the same amount of traffic even if you have electric vehicles. So the cities should be reorganized, and they will be. You have Barcelona, you have some other bigger Paris, some other cities which are like organizing in some kind of 50-minute blocks, where you on the outskirts of these blocks you have transportation, but inside where you had the transportations you don't have anymore, and they are used out for other types of commuting, for other types of social so other types of architecture that is used for a human living. So public transportation is important. I'm not sure if and when electric vehicles will be sustainable in a way that it can really serve the purpose. But at the same time, there are a lot of other technologies that are in the trials, and I don't know, hydrogen or something else may arise in the prospects. For the time being, we all should look all the available information, but we should look through the information that is served to us. There are a lot of business opportunities. Not all of these opportunities are truly sustainable, and I think the laws and the public pressure should be the one to help go into the right direction.
Yes, another question right here.
Oh, I hope you hear me. Good evening to you. And I have two short questions. So the first one is how to stop greenwashing in ESG companies. That's currently a really huge problem. And the second one is that I have done in my bachelor's thesis research for one company that was stationed in Gradačac, or maybe I shouldn't have said that. And they wanted to make a solar roof, and they are really high energy or a high energy intensive company. And although their roof has all been covered with solar panels, that has covered around 10% of their consumption. So having position of Gradačac where it doesn't have too much solar energy, it doesn't have too much wind energy. And when we talk this way around energy markets, I think we have a problem because we go from ground level up. Maybe we should go from high level down with influence by the local local environments, because the wind energy could be a solution here. We have winds from Dinara are complementary to winds in Vojvodina and Karpati, and we could then interconnect them so that would the transmission be the silver bullet of those markets and those problems, because we focus too much on small scale efficiency. That's something that has been done in 70s when there was the energy crisis similar to today, so we efficiency out our way to that crisis. But then we are trying to replicate those 70s when we did nuclear stuff, so we went from up level to the lower levels, and we made that solution. So should that transmission or going from high level energy projects would be a solution? So those are those two questions.
The first question, the greenwashing, is actually, for those who don't know, that is the companies are pretending, you know, like acting green, you know. So they plant 3 trees and they said our business is sustainable. But the sustainability of business is much broader. It should be looked from a much broader perspective, and you know, like how they we're in a you know, like a moment where we are talking about impact-driven companies. The impact-driven companies are the companies that take care not only about their business, but also about the community where they do their business. So the community interest should be taken into account. You can't, you know, devastate, especially in Africa or in other countries where they don't really care much, or in Bangladesh, like H&M, that you all like, is not paying living conditions to the employees, and yet they promote their business as a green. So it's not a green business, you know. And it's not only about your business in, for example, Sarajevo. You know, throughout your value chain, you should embed the policies which will ensure that your business is sustainable. Tomorrow, somebody will inspect if your business is sustainable or not. In terms of electricity, I think it's about the technologies, because the networks will be fully digitalized. At this point, I don't think that any of the countries of the XU is actually having the good infrastructure in place for the new technologies. So a lot of investment is required for that. You also have these microgrids, the batteries, the development of battery technology will also will move things forward, so that you will have this independent off-grid electricity batteries and things like that. So about the company that you are referring to, it's about embedding the sustainability principles in their business practices, where they will say that we have a certain target how we will change up until 2030, for example, and they will set an action plan. In that action plan, they will have 1, 2, 3, 5 investments where they are the most energy intensive, and how they will change. So that all will be taken into account tomorrow about the sustainability of their business, if they can prove that they are on the right track. No, not all of the solar panels will be able to be put on each individual roof, and even if you can put it, they will not produce enough electricity to power your business. There are other ways how you can supplement that. You can buy electricity from other companies.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Goran. So based off your presentation, about 45 garbage trucks worth of trash has been inserted into the ocean. So my question is, how can we as individuals kind of contribute to stopping that whole situation? And do you think that can the world kind of progress in a better way rather than right now as it's deteriorating?
The world should progress better than now. I don't think that the policies in place are really, genuinely serving the cause. They are creating some kind of speculative environment, and that's why the changes are not taking place in the most efficient way in terms of how we can contribute to decreasing the pollution. I remember when they said the seat belt, like when no one was using seat belt, and they said we're gonna tax you for not using seat belt. And at the time, people believed that won't work. It worked because people changed the practice. So the laws are, I think, something which should be a driving force. The laws should also think about embedding climate emergency, climate crisis into educational system. So the children in schools, universities, students, they should learn about where we are heading, how we can change, what we need to change, things like that. And these are just in inception phases in many of the countries. So there is no silver bullet. I think the synergies between different stakeholders should also be, this forum could be also one of the communication platforms on that, getting together the businesses, getting together the policymakers, getting together the influencers from the EU, and working on that side.
Any other questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I have a question for you. It's a quite different question than the audience has asked before. So what would you recommend to all of our students who are interested in taking a similar path as you, basically focusing their studies and professional career in helping companies and communities become greener or more eco-friendly, or in general creating a more sustainable future?
That's a good constructive question. So there is no infrastructure and capacity in place in none of ex-EU countries. Obviously, the laws will come, but I think at this point, all changes are market-driven, because in EU the laws are already implemented, but they, through the value chains, are affecting us here. So the companies themselves should seriously, and policymakers should seriously consider that as a threat, but also as an opportunity. In terms of the students, I think also the discussion with, like Ministry of Education, putting in place some of the courses on sustainability here, that could be a great prospects for them, because at this point, this ESG consultancy, sustainability consultancy, is in huge demand everywhere. Today, if any of these young people passed 1, 2, 3 certification programs from some of the institutions in EU, they will be on the front line of getting a job in big companies who must protect their brand by setting up the internal structures in a company. And that's new marketplace for them. So they should seriously consider that. They should start researching or following the sustainability issue, sustainability influencers, and I think that's the way how they should start.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, we have another question, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for being the last one to ruin your offstage climb. Very interesting presentation, lots of facts. What I'm interested to know is, given the fact that you operate in the Western Balkans region, have you seen good practices in the region by one or two companies that maybe you can just briefly elaborate on? Because I think often when we talk about sustainability in this region, we tend to focus on the really bad practices. But there are pockets of, I wouldn't say excellence, but there are pockets of companies and individuals punching through the expectations of the region. Can you maybe just finish on a positive note and give us a couple of examples that you may have seen over the last few years or even more recently? Thank you.
Well, not a couple of years, but we are working with some of the, for the last year actually, we are trying to find these pioneers, these trailblazers, as they call them in the West, but there are none. There are a lot of companies that are claiming to have their claiming that their business is sustainable. But when you ask them 2 or 3 questions, especially about internal structure of the, who is responsible for that part, because Chief Sustainability Officer should be somewhere between CEO and CFO. And, they say, well, I have a guy from a risk, I have a guy from marketing, I have a guy from government affairs, and we are starting, and we are, managing all of these. And these are examples of the big companies. So, I spoke with many of the executive, of the CEOs, of the presidents of the executive boards, and at the end of the day, it comes to how visionary a CEO or the owner of the company is. So it doesn't matter if it's 200 million business or 5 million. And we are just starting off with one company, starting off with helping them do their initial climate risk assessment, which is kind of the foundational milestone to go into developing the action plan, how they will progress up until 2030, how they will change. And they will be, in the next couple of months, an example that obviously we will start off. The interesting thing is when you speak with the international community and the whole context about, we are close to the extinction, and if we don't change up our business models up until 2030, we are doomed. And when you speak with the international community and saying, why don't you help Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro economy by supporting 10 companies to go into that direction, because there should be some external support for something which is new to get the whole process going. They said, but we have complex bureaucratic procedures. So it's against the global narrative, we have to do it yesterday. But at the same time, these international institutions like IFC, like EBRD, like many other, are saying, you need to pass 5 layers of approval process, and it takes a year. So at the end of the day, we decided not to go into that direction, but to speak directly with the companies whose business is affected by the changes that are taking place in EU.